All right, so I have a nice concrete 49ers update here for you from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. John Lynch just spoke about an hour or two ago. So we're going to go through a bullet point list of the news. Oh, hell, we also have some video content for you. This is John Lynch. Was at the podium next to John Lynch's. So Big Dom, the security guard, it must be the off season because he was on good terms with John Lynch. John Lynch called him a stud, actually. So that's probably not on your bingo card of what you expected to see to begin John Lynch's media session at the NFL Combine. But anyway, let's go through the news. First off, the 49ers have finally officially announced what they're doing about the departure of Adam Peters, the former assistant general manager, to become the general manager of the Washington Commanders. And the 49ers are promoting Tariq Ahmad and RJ Gillen to become their directors of player personnel. Adam Peters started with that director of player personnel job, and then he moved up to assistant general manager. So not quite assistant GMs for Tariq Ahmad and RJ Gillen, and they're not going to get a co-title. They're just both going to be directors of player personnel. Now, responsibilities probably going to remain essentially the same. Tariq Ahmad was formerly the director of college scouting, so he's going to stay in charge of the NFL draft because obviously at the combine and at the draft, you're scouting college players. And RJ Gillen came from the pro scouting side, so he's looking at other NFL teams and seeing who the 49ers might be able to sign in free agency. So now both of these guys have been promoted. They effectively replace Adam Peters, who actually spoke today for the first time at the combine as the GM of the Washington Commanders. Now, the combine, it was a hell of a scene, and I'll make a little video blog, a vlog, I guess, if you guys want to see a little bit more of that type of content. I could edit one together later. It's fascinating how many 49ers, ex-49ers executives and coaches you have at one time on the floor, and it just shows you the impact that this Shanahan-Lynch tree is starting to have on the rest of the league. But there was one point today where the Vikings, Queffy Adolfo-Mensah, who's their GM, was formerly with the 49ers front office. He was at one of the podiums. And then you had Mike McDaniel, the former 49ers offensive coordinator, now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, at another podium. And then you had Trent Baalke, who obviously isn't part of this current 49ers regime, but also a former 49er, at another podium. And then D'Amico Ryans came up to the podium that Trent Baalke was at. And after D'Amico spoke at the podium, we had a chance to chat with him. And one of the comments to D'Amico was, hey, the 49ers would really like you to knock out the Chiefs in the AFC playoffs. And D'Amico just smiled and said, all right, well, tell them to send me Fred Warner, tell them to send me Nick Bosa, and then we can start talking. Then I think that we'll knock the Chiefs out every single year. So that was a funny moment. But it was interesting to see all of the 49ers former executives and coaches in one spot. And somebody actually asked John Lynch about that, if he's proud about it, what are his feelings about seeing this type of impact from San Francisco. And John said, well, I'm proud, but it's also annoying because the 49ers have to replace so much talent on an annual basis. The league is looking to poach from what they're doing. And that's part of the process. Bill Walsh had to deal with it every single season as well. So the 49ers have obviously become a sort of organizational standard across the NFL with the success that they've seen over the past several years. And the NFL Combine is always an event that illustrates why that is. Lynch talking about the 49ers' new defensive coordinator. We don't know who that's going to be yet. He emphasized that they don't want a wholesale departure from their 4-3 wide 9 philosophy. And it initially seemed that answer would rule out somebody like Brandon Staley, who's run a 3-4 in the past, but who has interviewed with the 49ers. But when a follow-up question was asked about that, Lynch did not rule out Brandon Staley. In fact, he really emphasized that Staley would be versatile enough to adopt the 49ers job while not taking a wholesale departure from what this team has been doing philosophically. And I thought that the underreported part of this, and the part that really shines light on how the 49ers operate as an organization, Lynch emphasized that even an interview that doesn't turn into a job here can affect what the 49ers do moving forward. Philosophically, he said they use these interviews to gain new perspectives about what they might be able to do next as a football team from a schematic perspective. And he said sometimes hiring doesn't happen until 3-4 years down the line in terms of what that interview might do as far as bearing fruit in the job opportunity process. But he also mentioned that immediately you can add to what you're doing schematically, philosophically, through the information that you do glean in the interview process. A good interview process involves the candidate learning about the potential job opportunity and the job opportunity or the employer learning about the candidate. And sometimes in coaching circles, I think the 49ers want this to be all the time. They want ideas to be spread. They want to absorb ideas from defensive coordinator candidates in this case. And one of them has been Brandon Staley. Now, there are no other tangible updates on that front. The 49ers obviously are still interviewing people, a couple more candidates on the horizon for this team. Lynch talked about Daniel Bullocks, who's an internal candidate, their defensive backs coach. And Kyle Shanahan has indicated that he wants this to be finalized by the end of the week. The 49ers are not in a rush, nor should they be in one. They're the only team without a defensive coordinator right now, so they are not competing with anybody for particular talent at the position. So it's just, yeah, and it's not going to affect who they sign in free agency or who they who they're scouting at the NFL Combine. They've already made it really clear that philosophically they want to stay on the same page as they have been over the past few years. Obviously, there was a slight diversion there with what Steve Wilkes was trying to do with the secondary. The 49ers want that secondary and the front seven to be tied in more cohesively than they were this past year. That was the issue with Steve Wilkes. Lynch said that it had been gnawing at Shanahan for a while. I would say since about mid-season, you saw the struggles against Kirk Cousins and then Joe Burrow, and then he moved Steve Wilkes down to the field. I think that was an attempt to get Steve Wilkes on the same page as what the 49ers had been doing. Unfortunately, it did not work, and now the 49ers are looking for a new defensive coordinator. Lynch also mentioned that Dre Greenlaw's Achilles surgery went very well. We had already heard good news on that front, but they're hoping that Dre is back, ready to go next year. D'Amico Ryans talked to us about it. D'Amico actually had 2 Achilles tears in his career and obviously still came back to be a really good football player. So we'll see what the deal with Dre Greenlaw's Achilles is. Azeez Al-Shire is currently going to be a free agent when the new league year starts. Only signed a 1-year deal with Tennessee. And based on what I'm gathering, the 49ers will very much want somebody like Azeez Al-Shire back. Although they did draft a pair of linebackers last year in D. Winters and Jalen Graham. It seems like in this scheme, you can't have enough of these type of guys. And I think that Lynch emphasized the same thing about nickelback, where the 49ers just cut Isaiah Oliver. He said that's a position that you have to address every year. Don't be surprised that the 49ers add a nickelback in this player acquisition process. The 49ers are willing to give their receiver Jawan Jennings, who's a restricted free agent, a longer-term deal. RFA process allows you to tender a receiver, a first-round tender, second-round tender, right of first refusal, or even an original round tender, and Jennings was picked in the 7th round of the 2020 draft. But you can bypass that tender process and give a player a 2, 3, 4, 5-year deal if you want to. And the 49ers are interested in that type of longer-term deal. They did not rule out the tender process if that's what it takes to keep Jawan Jennings. And I think that the key to glean here is they really want Jawan Jennings back, so I'd expect them back in a 49ers uniform. Lynch today made a fairly long statement talking about the importance of having a second tight end to pair with George Kittle. Kittle also on the wrong side of 30 now. I don't think his play has slowed down. I think he's coming off of one of his better years. I mean, he's awesome as far as a versatile tight end. But you do want to think about getting a second guy so that you can develop him over the course of the next few years, so that, eventually when George Kittle is not with your team anymore, you have that. But now, while you have George Kittle, I think having a second tight end would unlock a lot of what Kyle Shanahan wants to do offensively. It's a very important position for him. So the 49ers might be in the market again for a second tight end. Remember, they drafted 2 of them last year in Cam Latu and Braden Willis. Latu spent the year on IR, so we'll see how that develops in-house. But the second tight end seems to be important to the 49ers. Who also, offensive line is important. I talked to John Lynch about his plans for improving the offensive line today. He wants John Feliciano back. There was a question about whether or not the guard, veteran journeyman, would be a scheme fit for San Francisco. he very much ended up being a scheme fit. In fact, he was the number 4 rated guard in run blocking by Pro Football Focus this past year. So they were very happy with Feliciano's run blocking. He eventually took over for Spencer Burford at that right guard position. There, of course, was the social media run in with Spencer Burford, but Lynch said that Feliciano owned up to that. It was after the Super Bowl, and he said he was just trying to defend Colton McKivitz, who was getting a lot of unfair flack for the missed blocking assignment on that 3rd and 4 in overtime. And in trying to defend Colton McKivitz, he threw Spencer Burford under the bus. Burford wasn't happy about that, but that's been resolved. The 49ers seem to be pleased with that. And I asked John Lynch, he said they're definitely interested in bringing John Feliciano back, who he thought was a really good fit. And they said they're also going to talk to Lake and Tomlinson's representatives. But as I discussed yesterday, Tomlinson's coming off of a really bad season. Probably not the player that he was when he left the 49ers a couple years ago. So I'm not sure if Laken Tomlinson's going to be high up on the 49ers priority list to bring back. I said yesterday, if they can get him back at a cheap rate, bargain deal, veteran minimum, whatever, that's something the 49ers, I think, would definitely kick the tires on. But that might not be realistic. We will find out, though, here over the course of time. So that was John Lynch at the Combine today. I have a few more notes that I could read off to you just to make sure this is a comprehensive update, because as you know, I make sure I give you guys concise, comprehensive updates every single time. Lynch wants to keep Brandon Aiyuk around. His quote today: "We've got a nice track record of extending the players who are important to us. Brandon is a guy we want to keep around for a long time." He's said that before, and the 49ers have followed through with their homegrown talent, the talent drafted by this regime every single time. Every single A-lister drafted by this regime has been re-signed when the time has come to big money by this regime. And it sounds like they want to do the same thing with Brandon Aiyuk. Now, if they're blown away by a Godfather offer, if there's, the king's ransom, I guess we can say, yes, the 49ers can move off of Aiyuk. That's the case with essentially every player. They did rule it out early on with Nick Bosa last year, but I think it's really clear, given how close this team was, how intent they are on kicking the door down next season. They want to keep the core together. Aiyuk is under contract with them. There's no reason to not keep him around based on how physical, just how damn efficient he was. He's one of the best receivers in all of football, so it wouldn't make sense. It would get worse if you let Brandon Aiyuk walk out that door this offseason. I would see no clear path to making yourself better, minus multiple first-round picks and hitting on them in the draft. And even if you do get multiple first-round picks, then it's not a guarantee that you're actually going to hit on them in the draft. Brock Purdy. There's a quote about Brock Purdy from John Lynch. "Now it's about building around him. It gives us a foundation to build off of. That's a really good feeling, a settling feeling." This is the first healthy offseason for Brock Purdy in the NFL, and the 49ers are very, very excited about it. So that was John Lynch. That might be the 49ers' last media availability until about a month from now at the NFL owners meetings in Orlando. So they won't go quiet. They're going to obviously start free agency. We'll see what their plans are with the rising salary cap. Obviously, it's risen for every team, not just for the 49ers, but it does seem like they're ready to push a lot of chips into the middle of the table. They're ready to be aggressive this offseason. Remember last offseason, I asked John about sprucing up defensive tackle with a higher price signing, and he said, "You're not sure if they have enough money to do that." Then they went out and they got Javon Hargrave. So brace yourselves. This team can be aggressive at any given time. All right, I'm off the right. This is a 49ers update. We're going to talk much more about this team a little bit later. So everybody stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you very soon.